interesting thing, too, about that. Uh, when Norlin bought Moog, the first marketing manager was Timothy O. White, who eventually went to Booth Newspapers. All of the marketing managers came from non-music backgrounds. Fisher-Price Toys, Quaker Oats, French's Mustard, Gabriel Shock Absorbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept preaching, well, the trouble is your marketing guys, they know a lot about marketing, but they don't know the field they're in. And this is a tiny little field. It's a mom and pop field. Now, again, another story even about that. But I remember when Norlin took over, I was tapped to, okay, he's going to survive the transition. And I heard right away, oh, well, you guys have only got 3 reps in the field. And so, we have 44 salesmen. We're just going to kill with Moog synthesizers. And I said, no, you're not. People just don't want to hear what's not part of the party line. And it's just endemic to human beings. And Tim didn't want to hear it. And, I got then from the VP of Norlin, I get such a dose of negative when I talked to Tom Rhea. And I went to him and said, hey, look, Chuck, you wouldn't get a dose of negative if you guys ever did anything right. I would carry you around on my shoulders, thereby, further endearing myself to them. But my ace in the hole was always, well, look, the guy sells about $7 million worth of stuff every year. What are you going to do? One Enlighten manager came in, and I was getting some static from a bean counter type, and he went and read the bean counter out. Says, what are you doing to my guy? He sells stuff. Leave him alone. That kind of stuff. But as it turns out, and I said it, again, the crystal ball, I said, no. I said, look, you got push, but you don't have pull. You can push them into the dealers. You can twist their arms because you got Gibson guitars. They want Gibson guitars. You can make them buy Moog. Okay? But you got no pull. You got no way to get the dealer to get them out. I think Vancouver had left by then. It's a little bit, it's very checkered on off, he and I both, because of who owned the company and, what they were promised, what we were promised, and so forth. All that back and forth. But as it turns out, it happened exactly as I said. Yeah, I said, you'll fill up the dealers, and therefore for 4 to 6 months, it'll look really good. The trend will look wonderful. You'll pound Moog synthesizers into every little nook and cranny in the whole country, maybe places in the world. I said, then the bottom will drop out, and it'll be like a cliff. You're not going to make them buy stuff they can't sell. In the final analysis, no matter how much they want Gibson, they're just going to tell you, okay, then I'm not going to buy any Gibson from you, and you sell it someplace. I've got a record of selling that. So, yeah, it happened just that way. Why? Well, they could make the dealers buy them, but they couldn't ensure that they'd get sold. So they kept looking at it as, it's a distribution problem. And now that we've got this distribution, everything's going to be rosy. And I said, no. And again, do people want you to rain on their marketing parade? They do not. So this guy actually fired me at a point, and I wrote a long memo. He kept another guy, I won't mention his name, but I had hired the other guy. So I wrote a longish memo pointing out, this is what I've done. It's what the other guy's done. And I'm coming over there Monday at your expense. Don't come. We won't talk to you. I said, yes, you will. I flew from Buffalo to Chicago, came in Monday morning. We'll see Tim. You won't see. I said, well, I'll sit here all day. Worse than that, I'll handcuff myself to something. I'll call the police. So finally he comes out and says, I told you we wouldn't talk. I said, I told you we would. We talked from 10 o'clock that morning till 2 a.m. the next morning. I had my job back. But that's the kind of problems, for instance, that the company had. Now, one of the things I'll tell you about Bob Moog, people say, well, Bob wasn't a good businessman. Bob had a third eye for people. When he was a garage shop and needing representation in the bi-coastal situation in New York and L.A., He chose precisely the right people to do that. Walter Sear on the East Coast and Paul Beaver on the West Coast, because of their connections, and just he knew and had a feel for people, and he found these people somehow, and it flourished because of that. So a lot of people look at business as, bottom line, numerical. This is how business works. Business works in many ways at different levels, of garage shop to entrepreneur to a multinational, multi-million-dollar corporation. Bob ran his business at the level it started and flourished pretty well. If one thing he erred on the side of spending too much of his time and company resources trying to do one of kinds of things for famous musicians who wanted certain things and stuff like that, paying a lot of attention to the field. And as Les Trubey, the partner of Vancouvering, told me, another one of my mentors, Les, he says, many times we make the sale, but somebody else takes the order for home organs. And I understand that exquisitely. Many times Bob Moog made the sale, but another company got to take the order, because Bob had blazed the trails and pioneered and, done the things that needed to be done. He hired this woman in New York for $25,000 a year to do publicity, in which most people must have thought he was insane, but the Moog synthesizer became almost generic.
Would it have done that without her, though?
I don't think, not as quickly. It's like everything. One of the problems with marketing, and Vancouvering pointed this out to me, he says, you can't win. If you go to Europe, which he did, and, vastly expand the dealership network and sell a whole potload of instruments and stuff like this, then he can have Bill Waitana publicly excoriating him at a dinner because, he hadn't done this before. So if you succeed, well, how come we didn't have this before this time? If you fail, well, obviously that, you get a $200 million parachute. It's the guy with Merrill Lynch, who blew $8 billion. But no, it is a no-win proposition, marketing in general, because nobody knows exactly the shape of that future. And if they fare well, it's what you should have done. If you don't do well, you're fired, kind of a thing. So interesting, there were 8 or 9 different regimes that I worked for at Norlin. All these MBAs, Master's Business Administration, from prestigious colleges, Yale, Sloan, Harvard, all those places. And yet none of them could function much better than the people that began the thing. So what does it tell you? Well, it tells you that when you make assessments about business, you need a broader context of how you're placing the people. A realization that all of the American companies went bankrupt or changed hands under unfavorable circumstances. Sequential Circuits, Oberheim, ARP, right down the line. And that the new generation of people that started building instruments were well-heeled, huge corporations that could come to NAMM and have a dog. Didn't matter. They're building sailboats too and motorcycles. Who cares? So I don't think the people at the garage shop up, which I was certainly a part of the up, maybe didn't understand that, as you could say, well, we should have, but okay. There's a natural business cycle. And then when you learn about that, you look back and you see what happened and you realize it was in the cards. None of those garage shop style companies was going to survive. And indeed, none of them did. I mean, there may be some of them out there that are using that name still, but it's not the same financial circumstance that's undergirding it. So, people have all kinds of opinions about things, but they haven't really looked at the situation closely. And they also don't have historical perspective. Oh, I've seen this cycle before. You saw it with Dumont in television. A brilliant man, but he wasn't going to beat RCA. This is just, it's endemic to our capitalistic system that these things happen the way they do.
Mm.